What's going on, guys? Coming back with another night shift preview this week. It is going to be night shift number 50. So, with very little roster moves and stuff going on right now, it seems like the perfect time to kind of do like a look back retrospective of like how we got to 50 night shifts, right? Like, I think people, if you haven't been in esports a long time, kind of take stuff like night shift for granted. Like, it's really cool that we have this like community round event that we can tune into weekly and just supports the scene from like way back in the day. And I feel like people, because of some branding stuff that shifted around, that people don't understand like how early on this core group of guys was supporting the scene and kind of like putting on community events and stuff like that. So something I kind of want to go in today, again, with very little roster or just competitive stuff going on in the scene right now. So for most people who don't know, is actually Night Shift is not the first endeavor that these guys went in with. They did start with Deadlock Fight Night, which was very similar format, like pretty much identical, honestly. This was back in the 4-lane meta into the 3-lane meta. So again, like very early, like 2024. This is like the very start of the beginning of like competitive Deadlock and like a real organized format, and also like a reoccurring format, because there was like, as you've seen in my other videos, there was like random like startup tournaments that would happen where it was literally just like two dudes like giving like mid-ass commentary, and like they didn't know how to do spectator, and it was rough. If you were watching back then, I wasn't even that into competitive Deadlock back in 4v4, back in 4-lane I should say, sorry. Because I just didn't know much about the game. I was very newbie at it. I didn't really understand the game at that kind of level, so I wasn't that into it. But going back retrospectively, it's pretty funny to see some of the tournaments back then. A lot of people will find a lot of nostalgia in the old intro. Boom. Deadlock Fight Night. So yeah, that was the old intro. A lot of people love that stuff. I'd be remiss to not go over some some of the stuff with this. With just old 4-lane meta. Like there's just so many thoughts that come into my mind. The old base is like obviously super iconic, super hilarious. That the base was like this. It was super clunky. Fights in the base never felt great. The worst part about it, the old base, I would say, was once you downed the patron, there was no protection if you were in the pit or whatever. So if you got late enough into the game, like you essentially would down the patron right away, and then you would just kill the weakened patron right away, because it was just so easy to end the game. It's also super easy to backdoor once you drop the patron back in the day. You didn't need like a minion or two. You could literally just like burst it down if you had enough damage. It was really funny how easy it was to end the game back in the day. And then obviously I would say something people are most nostalgic for are the tier 3 items, or just old item system in general, like Surge of Power here, or Silencer used to be in the Spirit Tree. I used to build Prestige Album every game because I was a Kelvin one trick back then. I built on a high velocity. I think a lot of people have nostalgia about the old items, but I think there's like not a lot of people talk about how like unbalanced the old items were. It was like there were some items that were just like insanely good, just like super overtuned. Obviously, if you didn't know back in the day, the trees were completely different. So you had 4 flex slots that you could fit any item into, that you had to unlock with different things on the map. Like it used to be you had to kill all 3 guardians to get one of these slots. I would have to be killing, I think it was 1 walker and then 3 walkers, and then it was cracking the base. Was cracking the base or getting a patron? I can't remember. I think it was cracking the base was to get the like last one. So slots were a lot harder to come by, and then you could only fit in 4 weapon, 4 vitality, 4 spirit, which again, kind of like we artificially have this with like the 4.8k spike now, but back then it was like you really had to like figure out like what are the best 4 items for your character in each tree, which was like a fun way. I think that's what people really enjoyed about the old item system, even if it did feel kind of clunky sometimes. And you can see how a lot of stuff had changed. Probably most broken in the game was back then was ammo scav. Ammo scav, anytime you denied or secured a soul, it would give you +1 ammo and bonus spirit power. So if you were good in lane, this item was just like super OP. Even if you weren't good in lane, like a lot of people would buy this item. As a Kelvin player, I used to buy Infuser all the time, back when it was 500, by the way, not 800. So they have changed the scaling of souls, like 6,200, 3,000, stuff like this. E-Shift used to be a 3k item. A lot of people don't know about that. Really funny, like how unbalanced and like just all over the place the game was back then. But people loved it. People, like this was when a lot of people fell in love with the game. It was just super weird to look back at now when you look at all of it. But you know, I remember Enduring Spirit, again, another item I would build a lot on as like a Kelvin player. There's just some of these items that were just like clearly way better than the rest. Balance was very early on, and was just really funny time to play the game. Again, of course, this was back in 4-lane meta too, so this is the old green Witch Street. These lanes were kind of like mirrored in their structure almost for the two interior lanes, so this is what they used to look like. I remember this fucking dumbass entry to the to the subway was so fucking annoying. I remember playing against like Average Jonas and stuff back when I was like just first starting the game, and he was like climbing through Phantom, and I would just get like hooked over this thing and be like, "What the fuck? This is so broken." Very glad it got redesigned. It was a very like clunky part of the lane. Very like you could. It's kind of like in Call of Duty they call it like snaking, where you could just like peek your head up, shoot down, up, down, especially like with characters like Holiday, where you just have like a kind of like a laser type of bullet. Really funny. Old mid boss, super nostalgic. There used to be a vent that you could hop into that would like essentially shoot you down like a slide into the mid boss pit. The rest of it is like somewhat similar, honestly. Like the stairs aren't as big, obviously. Like the huge staircase that comes down used to be like a lot more open area, like you were seeing over here. There used to be one rejuve crystal where you would punch it, and then your entire team would get one rejuvenator stack to use. Was super flippy. Heroes like Yamato were super OP in this meta because like obviously you couldn't get parried. You could punch it, and with Yamato it used to be invulnerable, so if you while you were in your ult you could only get brought down to 1 HP. You could never die. Calvin used to be able to freeze around the rejuve, but the rejuve wouldn't get frozen, so it would keep falling. Like it was a very funny time to be playing the game. And obviously like you look at these rosters, super nostalgic. This is when Calc was still on the scene before his wrist injury. Like used to be a very big name in the scene. PayPal is actually a notorious cheater. It has been confirmed that PayPal was a cheater. Again, we couldn't like verify these things as well back in the day, so PayPal was a cheater. Rokane's on this team. Naked's on this team. Lord NM. This is Deathy's TF2 Boomers team. Goomer used to be on this team. Scout was on this team. Salty and Fickle Frog, who are no longer in the scene, but used to be like big figures in the scene, were in here. And then yeah, just like rosters to look at that people haven't thought about. So this DFN Deadlock Fight Night number 16. You know, you had Ido in here. This one Pure was still playing. This is what I think one of the first teams Poppers played on. I'm not as in tune with Poppers' old history. Lomain used to be a melee creep. Pashi Pop was played on melee creeps, not just coached. AVG used to be on melee creeps. Cool Cheese, who was played for BWC and stuff after this. This is now the shift over to 3-lane. So this is the old the old blue lane, which was super not well thought out. So as you can see, Lomain's on Lash here. Lash was like insanely OP with the old blue lane because you could just sit on this very top of this this bridge here, and you could essentially just like free poke anyone. Like you just buy Mystic Shot and you could just like pew 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 and just like kind of just like shit on everyone up here, and then people just couldn't trade back with you. And then anytime you wanted to commit it to a slam, obviously you had the verticality there. So Lash just became this like giga OP hero for a bit. They had to like heavily nerf Lash after they introduced this into the game, which was funny. And then just to look at like some of the old designs and stuff, like old Lash, old Ivy was like so fucking cursed in terms of the character model. Same with Vindicta, like just very early on. Sinclair is literally like, I could make this looks like a PNG type of thing. Like this was like, you guys understand how early on the game was back then. But again, there was like, you know, the same casters you're seeing now, like who were supporting the game and were giving people a platform to show off their skills, right? So this is like the history of DFN up to number 22. There was 30 in total. You can see melee, this is like the beginning of melee creeps. Over at about like number 12 is when they started to come in. Llama Lords and Big and Brawlic were teams that had players that eventually became the melee creeps. The core of melee creeps was always like Saya plus people. John was also on the team very early on, but not at the very beginning. As you can see with like rosters again, like John's on this team, AVG, Pashi Pop, Lomain, Quig. This is the old Hydronation team: Cal, Hydration, Flick, Rokane, Rocker, Lefa. It's hard to be like nostalgic about like rosters of Hydronation because Hydronation used to just like fucking flip-flop players constantly. There was very few people outside of like Hydration and Lefa who were on the team for like extended periods of time. Rokane was on the team for a little bit, but for I guess longer than most, but excuse me. But Abraham's Murlocs. Murlocs were like an old school team. of like mainly like Russian people. You can see like Rake was on the team, Quilt, who was going to join Team Silence but then didn't make the cut. Jamside was on this team. Jamside was a huge part of early Deadlock. Saint was on Abraham's, then Tass together. Hoot used to be on Hams. A lot of people don't know that. And then again, just to give you like a closer look at the old models, this is 1win. Like the old Ivy model, bro. I feel like people forget, bro. This model was so fucking cursed. The face looked so fucked up. It's funny because now Ivy's like this like cute character that people love, but like old Ivy looks so fucked up, bro. It looks so insane. Again, like a lot of early names that are still in the scene. Empty Dreams, Overseas, ABL, people you would know and are still in the scene. And then obviously Virtus Pro. Yes, Virtus Pro used to sponsor a team. They sponsored Buff and Jors very, very early on in the scene. People don't know that. Did a video about that. This, you know, and again, names you would recognize. Like this is almost like the core roster of what is now like Buff and Jors, right? But some like bigger names that used to be in the scene. Mikhail S obviously was like very infamous in the scene. Infamous is the wrong word to use. Was very famous in the scene. Came up, was like probably the biggest content creator who was a pro that we had for a long time before like Ido like got more established. Shark is now back on Abraham's. There's a lot of people you would see. And then for Night Shift, the history of Night Shift, it kind of went on for up to 30 night shifts, and then kind of abruptly they were talking about like, oh, we'll take a reset, we'll kind of gather everything together and we'll talk to you guys again. People were kind of confused by that. It seemed like it was mainly like a thing behind the scenes, with like probably like an investor or someone who was kind of like at their like C-level of like their company. I don't even know if they were a company back then, but as you can see by the statement, there was like the core group of guys were like, hey, we're gonna go like do our other thing and just let you know if you hear anything coming out of the Fight Night social media accounts or anything. No, it's not from us. So there was clearly like an ownership problem going on, with like probably like direction or production, or just like there's probably like a power struggle of like who was making decisions, who was someone behind the scenes that we probably didn't even know. You probably hear it, they meme about it a lot, how Jake's like the CFO. And if I had to guess at the time, that there was probably someone who was financing Fight Night who was not seeing a return and was getting very upset. So they were like, hey, okay, you can leave. We'll go do our own thing. You can keep the socials, do whatever you want. If I had to guess, I don't actually know what happened behind the scenes, right? I was not following back then. But then obviously that led to the birth of Night Shift. Time to clock in. August 4th, 2025 is like right before the first ever Night Shift happens. So people are super excited. A lot of people were just waiting for it to come back again. Like even though the team was very early on, people were still really into competitive Deadlock, right? Like it was something they really loved supporting. And something they actually tried to launch was Project Night Shift, which was a kind of like broader esports. Never really took off. I could see this being something that come back to later on, if it is once they become more of like a B tier event or like a C tier event, because eventually there will be huge tournaments in Deadlock like that pull big prize pools, that are just going to get the majority of the viewership. People are going to like want to tune into those and then kind of get burnt out on like smaller events. So Night Shift eventually will become something that's more like community ran, even though it's purely community ran now. But even with it being more community ran, it'll still be like a smaller tournament in comparison to like these bigger tournaments that will happen, right? So Project Night Shift is something I could definitely see them like going back to once they're are presenting more to people, not as like the premier Deadlock event, but like, hey, you like these casters, you like the personalities, you like the relationships that are going on here. How about you support us in doing other esports ventures, right? So that's something they might go back to. Maybe they're just like, we don't want to do that anymore. It didn't work out, but who knows? But obviously, it all led to the first Night Shift ever happening on August 13th. Virtus Pro versus 1win, Valhalla versus BKP, and Hydration defending, and Abraham's defending. And you know, that brings us to like just today, the history of Night Shift. You know, I would say the early on days is when I got into it. I got into Night Shift around like number 5, I think. I remember Little Trooper stuff, but I was like tuning in and out. I wouldn't say I was like watching the whole event. I wasn't like really tuned in, but I remember Sneaking Golems very well. I remember Baroness Hotel. I remember Melee Creeps being on a break, coming back, all the stuff. So that's when I really got into it. And frankly, I want to make this video because like this is so cool that we get to be in this space and we get to like see a game evolve. We get to go back and look at like the game's been out for a little over like 2.5 years now. At least when the open access or the like closed beta that technically wasn't a closed beta happened type of thing. Back in like April of 2024. That's when a lot of people like Deathy started playing the game. And it's just cool that we get to kind of see the game evolve in front of our eyes, and we get to just enjoy the game. And you know, everyone talks about the golden ages. Everyone talks about like you never know when you're in them, and I really do think people will look back at these times before and even now as like we got to be part of like a game that got to evolve in front of us, and we had a lot of influence on how the game gets balanced, how the game is adjusted, and yeah, I think with the scene being a little bit quieter with roster moves, it was a perfect time to, and Night Shift turning 50, it was a perfect time to kind of like look back and do like a quick deep dive on how far we've come, really. And yeah, that's about it. I'll be watching the games today if you want to tune in and kind of see the history books get written live, if you will. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys for the games today. Peace, peace, peace.